Hello, good morning. Selamat pagi semua. Perkenalkan, for those of you who haven't heard my talk in Technomed, my name is Steve Young. I graduated from MIT with a PhD in biology in 2004. The person who was supposed to come to talk is actually my ex-PI, Professor Shuguang Zhang, but he sends his deepest apologies for not being able to come. He had to fly back to Boston due to a medical emergency. He was really looking forward to coming here, but he usually comes once every year, once every 2 years to Jakarta to visit us. So next time he comes, I promise you guys that I'll bring him to UGM. So I will be presenting a lot from his talk, actually. He is a passionate advocate for curiosity-driven research and research that nobody else is doing. And I asked him actually to talk about how do you translate research into the market. And there are some hints and thoughts that he has. I will end by giving you guys a little bit on my MIT's view on technology transfer. A lot of these data slides are actually I got from a technology licensing officer from MIT, who's a senior person who's in charge of licensing out technologies. I have given the slides to some faculty here, including Bu Uwut, and perhaps together we can learn from MIT's experience on how technology is transferred. So in terms of innovation and curiosity-driven research, if you attended the Technomed seminar a couple months ago, I gave 3 lessons basically of what is needed for innovative curiosity-driven research. And this is just a brief summary. Yeah? Lesson number 1 is to observe, and to observe things that are around you in normal situation even. The elements of this is to keep an open mind and also pay attention to detail. Yeah? This is very important, and this is why I made this mistake, just so that you will remember. Pay attention to detail. This is very important. Number 2 is that question. From your observation, come up with questions. Here is something that I feel, a lot of researchers, not only especially in Eastern societies, in China and Indonesia and a lot of Eastern cultures, they don't ask questions that are crazy enough. A lot of them are basically, they're safe questions to ask. The answers you sort of already know ahead of time what will be the answers. But with that, the answers that you get also will not be that significant. And I challenge especially the students, faculty of UGM, to go a little bit crazy on the questions. Mistakes are okay. Some people say there are no stupid questions. I posit that yes, there are stupid questions, but ask them anyway. Why do I say it this way? You can ask me if later on if you're interested why I state it this way. And number 3 is experiment. This is actually very important. If you're right, the finding actually may not be useful. And if you're wrong, the finding may not be uninteresting. Yeah? So being right in some cases may actually not be that significant. Make mistakes, recover fast, learn, and move on. Yeah? The most important thing is that these 3 elements you have to make into a habit. So innovation is basically a habit. You think about scientific questions, scientific queries. It's actually a habit that you do this. Yeah, it's not like one day you wake up and you go, "Oh, I discovered something." It's not like Einstein one day woke up and said, "E equals mc squared." No, but this is his habit to do thought experiments, to actually think through about problems in extreme cases, and he would question these things. And when he gets into the habit of doing so, once in a while, you would get questions that are pretty interesting. And from that, when you do experiments, you may find pretty interesting results that may shake the world. So, of course, I learned all of this from my mentor, who's Shuguang. And Shuguang learned this from his mentor, named as Alex Rich. Alex Rich learned this from his mentor, Linus Pauling. So in terms of scientific lineage, Xu Guang and myself came from Linus Pauling. He's our scientific grandfather. So Xu Guang is, like I said, a big proponent in innovation, in cutting-edge research, and also how to translate that research into a new type of economy. Yeah? And this talk he was supposed to give here. Maybe next time when he comes, he will expound on this and go into a little bit more detail. So this is his presentation, by the way, so I'll do my best to go through it with you. So he put down a couple of key elements for cutting-edge research. This is according to his experience, yeah? A couple of very, very important things. Free of all political influences and interferences. He hates it when administration, bureaucracy, political influence, even in academic settings, interfere with the day-to-day activities of researchers. He absolutely hates it. He has experienced this himself, even at MIT, and so he's a big, he's very anti this. Encourage original ideas from bottom up. This is actually very important, and this is what I've observed also when I talk to young people either in the US or here. There's sometimes there's a tendency for people who have position or have authority, when new ideas come to them, especially from a young person, the authority would say, the first thing the authority would say is, oh yeah, this cannot be done because A, B, C, D. The difficulty is da-da-da-da-da. And trust me, there's nothing more frustrating for a really energetic, really ambitious young student than from hearing that from his or her superior. Okay? Encourage continuous curiosity, observation, experiment, questioning, even as adults. Stimulate creativity. Honesty is actually very important. Academic honesty above all. Inspire passion for learning and knowledge, and to generate new scientific knowledge. Okay? He also has a couple of elements. I distilled it into 3 quotes from 3 great scientists. One is from Francis Crick. Again, he said, you should always ask questions, the bigger the better. The bigger questions, the better. If you ask big questions, you get big answers. You may get big answers. If you ask small questions, yes, you may be right most of the time, but the answers you get will not be significant. So that is from Francis Crick. Albert Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge. And this is actually pretty deep, because knowledge is basically regurgitating what you know, what you have learned from a book other people have discovered for you. But if you are imaginative, you can create new things. Yeah? You can discover new things. And a lot of innovation, of course, is from new things. And Leonardo da Vinci says it very best, very simple quote, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. The geniuses of the world simplify things for us, usually. So what Xu Guang says curiosity-driven research is actually expounded by this a person, Sir John Cadogan, who wrote about blue sky research. If you've heard of the red ocean, blue ocean strategy for business, for him, he proposed the idea of a blue sky research. Research that nobody else is doing, yeah? And there are some examples that he gave that of curiosity-driven research that ultimately resulted in new economies. Remember, when these were discovered, all these inventions, most of the time, the scientists didn't know what good they are for. Yeah? Such as lasers, for example, the concept. X-ray crystallography, liquid crystals, free radicals, transistors, photovoltaics. Photovoltaics, the original concept was from Einstein, the photoelectric effect. He probably didn't think of, solar panels when he thought of this. Radio, yeah, all of these things. But from these curiosity-driven research, from these discoveries, out came different types of industries. Media, from the new energy, computers, a big thing. Superconductors, for example, for resistanceless cables, NMR, etc. Alex Rich, again, he's currently sick. This is the reason why Xu Guang flew back. Xu Guang is very close to him. Alex was the discoverer of the structure of tRNA, and now the discoverer of zDNA also. And he said, it is important to know what to do. It is equally important to know what not to do. What are the questions, the experiments that are actually not that interesting? You have to have the courage. We all need to have that courage to say, you know what, I'm not going to do these, because they will not result in interesting answers. Once you go into that path, however, of asking big questions, of going crazy, the quote from Professor Bob Langer, he's an engineer at MIT, is very, very relevant. He said, a lot of times people will tell you that your idea or your invention cannot be done. The skeptics, right? Impossible. But I think that is rarely true. If you really believe in yourself and you really work hard and keep persevering, there's very little that is truly impossible. Yeah, this is what he said. And he's very famous for discovering over 25 biotech companies. He's also a huge consultant. He's very big in drug discovery, drug delivery. He's actually the father of drug delivery. Yeah, he invented the whole category, actually. So, what Xu Guang said, learning from all of the above, so we all need to inspire young people at all levels, stimulate researchers to be fearless. It is kind of scary to ask big questions and stand up in front of all the professors and all the skeptics and say, you know what, this is my question, this is what I want to answer. It's actually very scary. Do not blame them for occasional experimental mistakes. Yeah? But having all this, you do have to make very careful observations. You do have to plan your experiments very carefully, yeah, and reproduce observations and results. Also, Xu Guang is a big enemy of micromanaging researchers, especially. And this is, I guess, his experience I'll say it, in Singapore, where there are some labs where there's a huge emphasis on micromanagement and KPIs. And for science, that is not how it's supposed to be done. Yeah? Give researchers freedom to explore. Yeah? Have an open mind. Open door policy. This is actually pretty important. I don't know how it's done here, but I imagine it's not too different. So office doors should be open. Students can come in and ask questions all the time, to consult anytime. And then frequently talk with other researchers and share your thoughts, share your ideas. So a very, I should say, idealistic sort of view of how science should be done. Now, Xu Guang's perspective on translating research into a new economy. Just a couple of bullet points, yeah? So when we want to translate research into a company, for example, or into a new business, Xu Guang is pretty idealistic about this. He said, okay, in order of importance, and don't get it inverted and reverse, this is your priority. Number one, benefit society and mankind. Number two, you can use this to fund other research. Number three, fund other projects. Last is for your own personal benefit. Others may disagree with the order of this, but anyway, this is Xu Guang's opinion, and I think there's some truth to this, yeah? So again, the key is to stimulate, encourage, and support scientific, financial, and others, the curiosity-driven scientific research, and to translate this into enabling technologies, okay, that will benefit everybody. I think these are pretty obvious. To take calculated risk, ask good scientific questions. This is something, yeah, that may not be so obvious. Sometimes you just have to be very patient. Sometimes when you start something, you discover something, the application may not be very obvious to you, Last time in Technomet, I described about a peptide that formed into a gel when you put it in solution. When that was discovered by Xu Guang in the early 90s, he didn't know what it was for. But he was just curious about, hey, this is very interesting. How did this happen? So he investigated the science of it. And it wasn't until in 2000 or so that this product, this discovery became a product. And what product? It became a hemostat to stop bleeding during surgery. And we're registering that right now in Indonesia. We should launch that product this year. From early 90s to the 2000, late 2000, now it's already 2014, almost 20 years. So you have to be flexible, you have to be open-minded, and sometimes you have to be very patient. Now, just very quickly on MIT's view on technology transfer. The next few slides are mine, but I derived the slides from my friend who was an officer in MIT's TLO, the Technology Licensing Office. So a brief background about MIT. MIT is an old, relatively old institution. In the US, it's not that old, but compared to others, maybe it's older. 10,000 students, 70 departments. The annual research budget is about 1.5 billion US, sekitar 15 triliun. And industrial sponsored research 15 sampai 20%. Ya, ini yang industry gives funds to MIT. And from this infrastructure and from this basically environment, MIT is actually quite productive, not only in the total inventions, patents, licenses, but also the ones that are being sent out, that are being applied. Yeah? So these are the ones that are active, meaning that these patents, these inventions don't sit on shelves. They're actually being licensed out to companies or to startups. So a good number of them. Annual number about 400, 300 inventions, 100 licenses. A lot go to startup companies. There are a lot of spin-offs from MIT inventions. Okay? As a whole, there are more than 25,000 companies worldwide established through the MIT alumni network. If these 2,000 companies are combined, their revenue would be more than 2 trillion US dollars. Some of the examples are Texas Instruments for chips and DLP chips especially, Bose, Akamai, Dropbox, etc. So what makes MIT such a powerhouse? So my friend, his name is Mark Riol, said there are 3 main pillars. One is the ecosystem, 2, policies, and 3, the technology licensing office. In terms of the ecosystem, it is a society that embraces risk. Failure is not a black mark, meaning you tried, you fail, okay, no worries, try again. Okay? There are many informal mentors and coaches. Very easy for me, for example, in the biology department or the biophysics department to go to a chemistry professor, walk into the door and say, hey, you know what, I have this problem, can I talk to you about it? And they will say, yeah, come in. Yeah. Critical mass of entrepreneurship programs, either for undergraduates, graduate students, etc. The policies are actually very, very favorable also. The priority is always still on discovery, research, publication, and education. The processes are non-bureaucratic. A lot of people in the TLO, for example, each officer will have the final decision on how to license a technology and how much license fee MIT should charge. Just one person. Okay? So non-bureaucratic, very, very fast. They have the attitude of don't expect to get rich quick. Things take time. To develop a technology into invention, into a business will take a lot of time. And it has very clear conflict of interest rules. The TLO itself, the Technology Licensing Office, has the following attitude: impact, not income. They never think about income. The attitude also is to get the deal done. The deal, you finalize the decision at the table, meaning you negotiate, you decide then, and there. That is the attitude. It's, and university IP, intellectual property, is all risk, and the price should be low. And this is something that probably took MIT a while to realize, but this is maybe one of the reasons why there's a lot of industry that actually license their technology, because the startup cost is low. That's why there are a lot of startups, because some students will say, okay, MIT, can I license a particular technology? The MIT said, well, go ahead. Rather than having this technology put in the shelf, nobody use, let me just license it out to you for a cheap price. Okay? Cheap price, but the milestones are quite clear, yeah? You have to do this by a certain date, you have to do that by a certain date, etc. Well, not only that, but Boston and Massachusetts in general also have a pretty dynamic environment for startups. So, for example, in Boston, there are quite a few venture capitalists and angel investors for all stages and markets. Many nonprofit R&D centers, an MIT student can attend classes at Harvard, Tufts, BU, etc. Large number of companies in biotech, pharmaceutical, etc. And similarly in the state, di provinsi. Kalau Massachusetts itu seperti provinsi. So in terms of how much MIT gets from patents and licensing, it's actually not that high. I was actually a bit surprised when Mark showed me this. Remember, the research budget is about 1.5 billion US dollars, yeah? And each year, the technology licensing office only gets about $80 million from license fee and patent from when they license out the technology. From this, about 45% from royalties, yeah, and equity cash-in, meaning that MIT also has some shares in other companies. So very, very small, actually. So again, the focus of the institution is not to make money out of their invention. It is to actually still to educate, to publish, and to do research. And by the way, here, inventors share 1/3 of royalties, yeah, after deduction of fees and etc. So even the inventors don't make that much from this. So what are the advantages that licensing out actually gives to MIT? There are what we call non-financial benefits. Not direct, but actually I would say even more important. Number one, creating entrepreneurial graduates. You become expert in the field. You collaborate more with industry. You participate, the staff can participate in startup. Mark, for example, he was an officer in the TLO, then he became a CEO in a startup company. Yeah? So this is actually an incentive for talented staff to join MIT, because they have also this opportunity to go into business later on. And creating jobs and also economic development. This is the overarching goal of the entire thing. So I guess quite some time ago, MIT decided that their mandate still has to be in education, basic research, and publication. The funds, the money that they get out of licensing is actually secondary. They would rather focus on these type of non-financial benefits. An example of how a startup company works, yeah, at MIT. So for example, a university gives a license to a startup company X, gives a license to use and develop the core technology. Company X usually doesn't have that much money. Okay? So what it does is that it would give sub-license to some other companies. Yeah? So the other companies would pay a sub-license fee to the company X. And company X would then pay a pretty low licensing fee to MIT. These other companies then would introduce products to the market. Now once company X is established enough, it can then usually much later introduce its own product. So this is usually how startup companies in biotech especially works in the US. Interestingly, over here in Indonesia, there is now a huge wave for this startup company, but in the tech industry, in internet, e-commerce, huge. And a lot of VCs, a lot of venture capitals are actually looking into Indonesia. A lot of scientists, consultants, bankers Indonesian who would work outside would actually come back to Indonesia to start up these tech companies. And it looks like in the next few years, this is going to boom. Yeah. So it's actually a very, very interesting time in the tech space in Indonesia. So that's it. I know it's brief. Hopefully I was able to give you some ideas on the elements of curiosity-driven research and also how MIT and Shuguang think about how to translate those into new economy. Thank you very much.